Emilio 37, the legislature in Guam is back in session. We again are second reading, resolution. Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, Madam Speaker, that for the most part, many of our colleagues have already expressed the overwhelming sentiment of what needs to be done. And so therefore, I'm going to go ahead and close my closing statement. Again, encourage my colleagues to vote on this matter and move this resolution number 215-37 COR into the third reading.
All right, on the motion to move resolution number 215-37 COR to the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I'd actually move.
Senator Blas, you're recognized.
I'd like to further move, Madam Speaker, that we move into the third reading and for the matters of voting on resolution 215-37 COR to move on voting on it without engrossment.
All right, on the motion to vote on resolution 215-37 COR without engrossment, is there any objection? No objection, motion carries. Is there anyone who needs a copy? Okay, all right. I think copies were passed out yesterday. All right, and there were no amendments, so we will proceed with voting. Clerks, could you please read the title? Sergeant, if you could just make sure to call the other senators that we're going to vote. All right, clerks, please read the title.
Resolution number 215-37 COR, introduced by Frank Blosh Jr., Tello T. Tidegui, Joanne Brown, Christopher M. Duenas, Thomas J. Fisher, Jesse A. Lujan, relative to urgently and steadfastly requesting the Governor of Guam to acknowledge the dire and decrepit conditions that exist at the Guam Memorial Hospital and to declare a state of extreme emergency to address the unsafe, unhealthy, unsanitary, and financially challenging conditions that exist there.
Roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Barnett, aye. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, aye. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, aye. Senator Duenas. Senator Duenas, aye. Senator Fisher. Senator Fisher, aye. Senator Lujan. Senator Lujan, aye. Vice Speaker Munya-Barnes.
Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Sanoxin, you're recognized.
I'd ask the body that excuse the members not present today.
On the motion to excuse members not present, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Vice Speaker Munya-Barnes, excused. Senator Parkinson. Senator Parkinson, nay. Senator Perez. Senator Perez, excused. Senator Kanata. Senator Kanata, nay. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, nay. Senator Siniclis. Senator Siniclis, excused. Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton, excused. Senator Taitigui. Senator Taitigui, aye. Speaker Terlahi. Speaker Terlahi, aye.
Resolution number 215-37 COR received 8 ayes, 3 nays, and 4 excused. Resolution number 215-37 COR is duly adopted by the body. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to go back to motions, please.
There's a motion to return to motions. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection. Is there an objection? There's an objection. All in favor of going back to motions, please raise your hand. Motion carries. Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to notwithstanding House was to reconsider the actions of the body on Bill number 164-37 LS.
There's a motion to reconsider the actions of the body. Is there any objection to the motion to reconsider? There's an objection. All in favor of the motion to reconsider, please raise your hand. Motion to reconsider passes. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that we place Bill number 164-37 LS as introduced by Senators Jesse Lujan, Talo Taitigui, Joanne Brown, Christopher M. Duenas, Thomas J. Fisher, and myself, Frank Blas Jr., which is an act to provide emergency funding to the Guam Memorial Hospital. Onto the session agenda.
On that motion to place Bill number 167-37 LS.
164-37.
Sorry, 164. 164-37 LS onto the session agenda. Is there any objection? There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries. Is there any other motion? If not, then we are in second reading. Bill number 164-37 LS. This is an act to provide emergency funding to the Guam Memorial Hospital. This is an appropriations measure. Automatically, we will convene it to the Committee of the Whole. It will be chaired by the Chairperson of Appropriations, Senator San Augustine. So we are going to take a 1-minute recess and convene in Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole is called to order. Materials for the Committee of the Whole are in shared session Google Drive folder labeled Committee of the Whole, Bill number 164-37, proposed amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email session drive@guamlegislature.org. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. Rules of engagement with the Committee of the Whole. There will be 2 rounds for questions and 1 round for comments or amendments. Senators will be allotted 5 minutes for each round for questions, not including responses. Time to speak may not be used from more than one member to another. A member will use a member's time on a question, use all that member's time on that question, and may not later speak, even if all the time used was not used. That's in section 1.02D3. Questions shall be confined to the substance or nature of the bill. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individuals testifying is not permitted. Any violation of the general rule of conduct will be called out of order and may result in removal from the hall. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum will be restricted from participating and will be removed from the hall. After we complete discussion of the bill, I will allow the sponsor to close and will entertain a motion for the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, followed by a motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole, at which time I'll report out the bill as recommended by the Committee of the Whole. With that, I'd like to also recognize the panel members that are here at this time. But first, I would ask the Sergeant at Arms to please swear them in, and then I'll have them introduce themselves individually. And I'd like to advise my colleagues that the OPA was here earlier. He had to go to a meeting, and he said he'd be right back. When he comes, we'll just continue on where we're at. Sergeant at Arms?
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Chair, there are the oaths. You may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. And I ask each panel members first to introduce themselves individually. We'll start with the OFB side.
Vanessa Valencia, OFB.
Llewellyn Terlahi, Chief Fiscal Analyst, OFB.
Lester Carlson, BBMR.
Edward Byrne, Director of Administration.
Lillian Perez Posadas, GMH.
Yuka Hechanova, CFO, GMH.
William Kando, GMHA.
Thank you. At this point, reminding my colleagues, we're on Bill 164-37 LS, introduced by Senator Jesse Lujan, co-sponsored by Senator Tello Tadiwi, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Tom Fisher, and Senator Frank Blas Jr. An act to provide emergency funding to the Guam Memorial Hospital. I'll now ask the author of the bill, Senator Lujan, to please give your opening statement on your bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, good afternoon, panel. You know, the state of the GMH is, of course, the most utmost importance. It shouldn't be lurching from crises to crises. I ask, how can we focus on a new hospital or medical facility complex that is maybe a decade or so away when our current hospital is neglected and is in need of urgent care, critical care? As we all have said, that a new medical complex or a new hospital is a wonderful goal and one we all need and one we don't object to. But GMH needs immediate funding and immediate attention. So between then and now, what is the plan as we are awaiting for a new hospital or a new medical complex? And I ask each and every one of you in the panel to contemplate the question and to contemplate it with urgency. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask some questions of the panel. I got a couple minutes.
No, I'm just going to allow you just to introduce
Oh,
your
just
bill.
introduce
And
it?
then we're going to do our rounds,
Oh,
okay,
okay,
Senator
okay.
Lujan?
So, yeah.
We'll get with you. Senator Blas, you're the first one on the first round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the panel, thank you very much for being here today. And I'll go ahead and get started. To the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, the staff there. What is the state of condition right now financially? Yuka, if you can go ahead and provide. You provided something on the oversight hearing previous, but can you go ahead and give us again what the condition is, financial condition of the hospital?
I guess I can go ahead and let you know what our accounts payable is, probably.
Yes.
So right now it's at about $28 million in amounts that we owe to vendors. Let me see. And then on our receivables, it's about 40 million right now. Is there anything else that I don't recall what I've reported on before?
Your CIP?
The status of the CIPs?
Yes. And how much is it going to cost?
Would that be, maybe Mr. Kando can.
We need approximately $20 million to start implementing as soon as possible our highest priorities, and so that's what we're focused on. Is internally we're discussing what those highest priorities are, given their current readiness to proceed with those, which ones are already under design or have completed design, and so we've already hashed that through, but we want to look at it a little further before we come to a final decision and share it with the board. But we're ready to work on those and roll those out.
Okay. You know, during the oversight hearing and actually after, I'm sure that Ms. Posadas, Ms. Echanova, and Mr. Cano, you've been wary of, I guess, the information that's been passed in the community about the conditions that exist in the hospital. And one more very recently was a photograph of a snake that was captured in the hospital. Right now, how would you describe the conditions in the hospital, and as far as with the mold, infestation, and whatnot?
We don't have an infestation of snakes. We found one snake. As far as the mold, we have. I mean, we've been replacing ceiling tiles for many years because we've been slowly in the process of replacing a lot of our air handling units. That really, we have issues with our envelope, which allows warm air into the facility and allowing for condensation on our chill water lines. So that's not leaks necessarily from the roof, but those are air handling units that we've already procured about 25 out of 64. So air handling unit replacements continues to be one of our major priorities. We have the mold assessment that's ongoing. We should be receiving, the consultant should be receiving the results of that assessment, those samples, so that they can formulate their report, and we anticipate that report being completed this month. So that's for the mold that's hidden mold, in possibly behind walls or in our ventilation system. We want to know.
Okay. The Office of Public Accountability recently came up with a report, and granted that it was with regard to your the financial highlights of fiscal year 2022, and there was a reference to, in as far as the facility condition assessment of the hospital. Are you familiar with that?
Are you referring to the Army Corps of Engineers assessment?
Yes.
I'm very familiar with that. That's our prioritization of our CIPs is heavily focused on rolling out and completing those projects, which many have already been completed. So we've been focusing on the air handling units. We've been focusing on the repairs to the roof. In the meantime, we've stabilized the hospital as far as the ventilation system because we've been able to maintain our two 450-ton chillers. Both of them are actually operating efficiently. So that's going to allow us the time that we need to also plan to replace them. And in the meantime, we've been putting in splits and portables, but we're being very careful with that because we want to make sure we have a contracted electrical engineer that's going to make sure that we don't overload the main panel as well. So we have to do that very strategically. And we have our next projects that we consider high priority that we're planning to roll out this year and next year.
Okay. So it's nice to hear that you've started to, are you working on those areas that the Army Corps has stated that, from my understanding, absent the new existence of a new hospital is continuing to maintain our current facility, okay? At this juncture, at this point in time, do you have the financial resources to be able to complete that as well as to be able to pay off your pay down your vendor payments?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. That's actually the answer I was looking for. You know, this bill, what this bill will basically provide is the funding that's necessary, the funding that can, not just necessary, but is quite honestly very much needed to be able to put you through. And I think that one of the other things that was a major concern with regard to this is the fiscal management of the hospital and how you take care of you know, the monies that you're getting. And I remember there was a conversation with regards to your, to basically your billing system and your ability to collect. Where are you with that right now?
You're talking about the system itself?
Yes.
We're pretty much status quo. The billing department has really made a lot of workarounds because we're just, we're at a standstill with some of the limitations on the system that we have right now. So we do extra work just to get the bills out, and they've been very creative and very effective at what they've done. So the past couple of months, we've had very good billings, thanks to the very hard work of the billing team.
Okay, so when you say status quo, what do you mean by status quo? What is status quo?
There's just some issues with the current EHR that we have that are, it's not the same as our former EHR, so there are some charges that don't come through, some interfaces that are not working, and that's caused some backlog in the billing. But instead of waiting for these things to be fixed, we found some workarounds to get those things done, because really the main focus of the team is to get the bills out timely so we can get paid.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, actually, you know, I know there's going to be more of the questions. I just needed to get that, set that as a foundation, the basis that the Guam Memorial Hospital needs money. They need some help. And I think that's the whole purpose of what this hearing is for, and to be able to find that. So I needed to establish that as the groundwork about it. So what I'd like to do is the remaining of my time is go ahead and, or you need that? Okay. I'd like to defer the rest of my time on this round to Senator Dueñas.
All right, thank you, Senator Blas. And just also, my colleagues like to recognize that former Speaker, the OPA is here, Auditor BJ Cruz. Senator Dueñas, you now have you should have 7 minutes and 55 seconds. If I'm correct, I saw 2:55 up there, right? Okay, 7 minutes and 55.
Oh, it's 72 minutes.
No.
I don't need that much.
Yeah, he only really needs 55 seconds, but we'll give him the 7 minutes and 55 seconds. 7:55. 7:55, that's 7:33 only. 7.55. There you go. That's his time. Senator Dueñas, sir.
Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to open with a couple of things that we know, happily. The governor, in her letter, written to the legislature and overall to the people of Guam, has committed $20 million from the ARP funds. I'm going to ask some questions in terms of where that's likely to go, as it's been announced that should be dedicated towards CIPs. So I want to focus on really the gist of this bill in terms of unappropriated funds, or actually funds that will be excess revenue on 2022 and 2023 that's in this bill. And the intention overall is to really focus on what many of us believe in this body should be the #1 priority at this point, and that is the Guam Memorial Hospital. As they have come to us now a couple of times, and we've, I think, settled down on the number between $28 to $30 million in terms of what's needed. I think it's imperative that we get there. We've got to get there somehow, and so I want to, at this point, focus my attention with Mr. Byrne, and in order for us to be moving prudently, and I'll be speaking with asking questions of the public auditor as well, is I think to lay the groundwork here. What is the status of the 2022 audit?
Well, thank you for asking that, Senator. The public auditor no doubt will give his answer to that. We are in the middle of trying to finalize the audit. I was actually on page about 127 when I was called down here of 217 pages. Tomorrow we have a meeting with the auditors on the single audit, so that senators understand. The actual audit is divided up into kind of 3 parts. There's the financial statements, which is what I was referring to, the 217 pages. There's a single audit, which currently consists of about 80 pages, which is the report on the federal expenditures. And there's a management letter, which I haven't yet seen, so I can't comment on that as to what part the auditors have reached with that. We're all working very hard to finish it. The numbers are the same numbers at the moment as was released by the governor about 3 weeks ago. But I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Carlson, to comment upon the availability of any fiscal 22 funds, because the audit obviously is fiscal 22. We've only just finished fiscal 23, and therefore we haven't even started the audit of fiscal 23.
Yeah, I will get there in a moment, but I want to lay the groundwork because, first of all, I think I could just shift over to the public auditor at this point. Mr. Speaker, public auditor, can you give us kind of a background in terms of your interaction with Department of Administration and the status of this audit and why we're so late and how critical it's going to be for us to be able to work with appropriating excess funds?
Before I begin, I want to personally apologize to the speaker and to all of you about the delay in the issuance of the audit. We did an RFP for a new auditor last year because Deloitte closed. I approved the selection of EY sometime in November. Unfortunately, the contract was not signed by the previous Attorney General. I don't know why, but it had been approved and had started and had been sitting at the Attorney General's office and wasn't signed until, I believe, January, February this year, at which time EY started the audit. There was an issue that they had with some numbers, and it resulted in a substantial delay because there was back and forth. That was finally resolved in late June, early July. The government finally provided a financial statement with its trial balance sometime in late July. And we've been trying to get the audit done ever since. I know that every time any of you have texted me and any of you have called me, I have apologized that I cannot and will not discuss audits that haven't been released. I was disappointed, maybe even dismayed, to hear that numbers were being bandied about in press releases of an audit that had not been released. And when any of you have asked me where that number came from, my response was I had no comment because there was no audit that had been finalized for which I could speak about. It is true that we are, at this point, trying to finalize the audit. I was here at 2 o'clock for the 2 o'clock start, but I had to run back to my office because I had scheduled a 3 o'clock status meeting with Department of Administration and its people, and also with EY. Unfortunately, Mr. Byrne was here. But we are in the final throes. And the thing is that it needs to have a management response. And as he said, he's on page 127 of 180 of trying to get a response together. I was also notified today that there's a need for a corrective action plan of the single audit, and the departments are not responding as quickly to Mr. Byrne as they really should have. I mean, all this information should have been at Mr. Byrne's office last January. Why it's still not there in September, I have no idea. But he's trying to get it so that he can submit it, and EY can't and refuses to release it unless they get a corrective action plan. And so that's where we're at.
Speaker, you know, not asking you to opine, I don't think you would anyways, but in a hat that you wore before, here we are, and what we've done is we've appropriated, and one of the reasons why we structured this bill the way we did was because it's become a practice, given the tracking of excess revenue, to be appropriating within the fiscal year, basically doing supplemental appropriations. And the reason why I'm going down this road is we believe that the most prudent way, and you've mentioned this before on the record, the most prudent way to identify the funds that are needed as we go along until we can return GMH to solvency is to basically use revenues. I think it would be imprudent at this point to even attempt to use current fiscal year because we've just started. We have no clue what the waters are going to look like going forward. But what I'm trying to get at is, do you once again reiterate on the record what you've discussed, is that once an appropriation is made, it's viable and durable, and it is a funding source as long as that becomes the law and is not repealed?
That is correct, and unfortunately, in the 5 years that I was chairman of the committee, there was never any excess. There was never a surplus, so I don't know what that luxury is like to be able to do that.
You've never had that wonderful problem. Okay, well, so that's why I wanted to establish the basis, because whatever we decide on here, we're going to have to make sure that I'm sure there's going to be differences in terms of what the priorities are or what other funding sources should be used. But I had to get you back on the record on that one because you've made it clear to us that you know, if we want to really be prudent and scrub our books and understanding what this body and what is, you know, what good management of funds are, we have to be clear that unless a bill is or law is repealed, that funding source is viable, and then it's up to the chief executive in terms of what the priorities are going forward. So, back to Mr. Byrne. So, I think here we are now, and notwithstanding the, I don't know about trepidation, that might be a heavy word, but notwithstanding the advice of the public auditor, you have released numbers, and so let's get to the numbers now. What, if this bill were to pass as it is, at least for fiscal year 2022, what would potentially be available?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Carlson on that because he has all the numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson?
Probably going to take all the wind that I have, but the bill that was introduced, number one, we want to work together. We see this as a very important piece of legislation. We're glad to be here to help push this through. There are issues with the bill as introduced. The fiscal note that we provided states 22 was over appropriated by $19 million. So, for the record, 22 is off the table. It also says 23 audited excess funds. We're just closing 23. If we waited for the audit, it would be hopefully not this long, but certainly months. So, in conversation with Senator Lujan and the governor yesterday, and a letter that was written and responded to, the governor stating her commitment to assist, we were then tasked to be able to find a way to make this happen. I'll note for the record that there is no dollar amount. So I'll take that as an opportunity to begin a meaningful discussion and hopefully come up with a mutually agreeable plan. So back to 22. We went through an exercise of taking appropriations, knowing full well that they were more appropriations than we had revenue. Then we looked at how much of those appropriations were actually spent. And I think the good Lord was smiling down at us, because when we took funds that, by the way, this is a culmination of all the continuing appropriations that are currently on the books. We did not touch any entity that had the ability to use prior fiscal year funds. And we basically got it down to, believe it or not, close to the 19 million. And these are unexpended funds essentially 2 fiscal years ago. There is no provision that allows for any one of these areas that we touched to be extended and for the use to go beyond fiscal year 22. So we essentially balanced the checkbook, wrote off 22 as a fund source, and turned our eyes to 23. Okay. If you guys take a look at the CRER that we were sending, the last one that we sent, we showed we were doing well again. There were bills that were passed subsequent to the Budget Act that ate into the excess. And we do have preliminary September numbers in the summary that we'll pass out to you guys shortly. We were able to take 23 funds, and you'll see where they came from, to cobble together $30 million without touching 24 whatsoever.
So I guess at this time, Mr. Chairman, I want to do one thing, and then I think if you think it should be prudent, I think we should be working with that worksheet because we have to, you know, kind of evaluate the veracity. But I want to, maybe while we wait for that, I want to get back to Yucca real quick because I think this is a proper exercise as well. Yucca, you know, can you just give us a solid on the aging in terms of what are the expenditure categories? Because I think one thing, several things I think we can agree on is the fact that we got to get to the most vital, and I'm not going to micromanage your organization, but I think it's really important to know on the aging of those and the critical and the vital, because it may also factor into the release and how we evaluate what projects have been put on the chopping block, if you will. It looks like we're following the prudent man requirement from our public auditor and doing the diligence of line iteming out those things which will generate the revenue that may be, you know, may come to some consternation of some members who appropriated those funds, but so be it. Right now, we're talking about the hospital. So, Yuka, can you basically just give us a verbal and then maybe prepare that for us as well so we have the two worksheets to work with?
So as of October 6th, our payables were at 28.8 million. A big chunk of that, 8.9 million is for our travel nurses. We owe 2 million in utilities, power, water, and about 4.2 million for contractors that are on the operational side, and about 12.2 million on the clinical supplier side. One thing to note is the aging does change every day. We get invoices every day, we make some payments. So this is as of October 6th, but I will gladly provide a more updated one to the body.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I think that this is going to be critical for us because I think we've established, and we can go to Cando and the structural issues later, simply because of the fact that those are going to require, I'm sure, procurement, and that funding source of the 20 million that's committed is I think, absolutely critical, but it's also probably heavier in terms of procurement as opposed to paying bills, right? Like pharmaceuticals, suppliers, things that will immediately get us on track. So I think at this point, if we can take a short recess to get those two worksheets, and then we can move from there.
Yes, the committee of the whole will be on recess until we get all the documents. Mr. Carlson? Mr.
Carlson.
Can I add suggested revisions to the bill as well?
I think as we go along, because those will be amendments, you know, on the floor if the body wishes, but if we're working with 23 and what we're doing there, I think for a start, Lester, unless you think it's going to take us a different direction, I think no. we get off on a start here, and then because we've, in my opinion, we've got to establish the baseline. Where's the money? And once we know that, then we can move from there. So I think knowing the projects that are you know, balancing the checkbook, knowing what projects may be off the table, or how that generates the surplus to include a CRER that's upcoming that closes out the fiscal year, we'll know if it's real money, and we can work from there.
All right, we're on recess at this time, so we can get the documents. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Colleagues, at this point, we're going to finish off the one round, but only for questions for the OPA. And then we will recess so that everyone can digest the documents they have in front of them and they understand what we're going to discuss tomorrow. And with that, does anyone have any questions for the OPA? And I'll just raise your hand and tell me, and then I'll pick you first until we complete everybody. Anybody have any questions for? We're only going to be discussing the OPA. Senator, do you have any questions for OPA?
Mr. Chairman, I've completed my questions for the OPA in my statement, so I'm good.
Okay. Senator Parkinson, anything? Nothing? Senator Burnett, nothing? Madam Speaker, do you have any questions for the OPA?
Yes, thank you. And thank you again to all the panel for being here, especially the public auditor. He's been here for 3 days now, waiting for us to call him in. And I know that he's in the middle of trying to finalize this audit. Can you just explain again the delay of the audit? Because we were really hoping, we had tried to, change the law even to make sure that we can get the audit before we do the FY budgets, and that we would be able to know for sure what the excess was for the prior year, and not have to receive the nasty letters like we did about, oh, you're over appropriating when the CRERs are showing us different information. So if you could just tell us one more time, what's causing the delay?
For the current audit, is it coming across? For the current audit, the delay is being caused by the fact that Department of Administration, or more directly Mr. Byrne, has not been able to get some departments to respond to him on the corrective action plan that they are going to implement to address findings about their utilization of federal funds. That's what's holding up the single audit.
Which agencies?
I have not spoken publicly about what is in the audit, because I purposely don't want to have to say anything, but inasmuch as the administration is the one that is publicizing all kinds of numbers, I'll let Mr. Byrne tell you which agencies are not responding to him.
All right, do you believe then that Mr. Byrne's fully aware of which agencies he's waiting for, and therefore you are waiting for, and the people of Guam are waiting for in order to complete the FY22 audit?
Yes, I try to be professional about the fact that I do not discuss audits that aren't finalized and released.
All right, so
unfortunately, the administration has decided that it wants to talk about contents of audits that aren't released. So if they are, I'm sure he'd be willing to tell you who he's having to deal with that is delaying the audit.
So the corrective action plans that we are all awaiting in order to complete the audit are corrections for findings, as you call them, meaning something's wrong. There was something wrong. The audit had a finding that something was either done wrong or finalized wrong, and it needs to be corrected. So they need to tell you how they're going to correct that.
Yes, if those of you that read last year's audit, there was about almost 24 findings. And the administration is responsible for providing a response that says that either we agree or we disagree with the finding. And if we agree with the finding, this is how we're going to address it in the coming year.
All right, thank you. There was a September 13, 2023 letter from the governor's office. It's a press release. It talks about general fund surplus for 4th consecutive years, unaudited. and it talks about having a $105 million net surplus, I guess. And if you take out the $28 million that goes to the rainy day fund, they have an operating surplus of $77 million. And then they went on to say that if you take away the appropriations made, that there is an unassigned surplus balance is $9 million. But that was September 13, 2023. That was after the budget bill was passed by the legislature. And then we got a fiscal note, I think it was on September 15, on the bill that we're talking about now. The fiscal note says, excess FY22 revenues were over appropriated even prior to these new appropriations from the FY24 budget. And I guess I'm just trying to reconcile those two. Are you able to confirm the numbers that the governor sent out in her press release, first of all?
One, I cannot confirm or deny that there is $105 million in excess. There is a number in the budget, but it's not been finalized. And so I will not be the one that exposes it. If the administration wants to do that, they may. But I cannot professionally do that, and I won't. Where they get the other numbers, I cannot address those because those were done in 23. I haven't even done my entrance meeting yet for the start of the 23 audit, or I'm not sure even if they finished reconciling 23 yet. That was done in 23. And that audit is months out. We haven't even started it. So I don't know where those numbers come from, so I cannot address those, unfortunately.
All right, well, they're talking about FY22 revenues. So what they're saying in September is that they had $105 million excess, and if you take away all the appropriations from that excess, there's still $9 million left. But 1 month later in October, they're saying, oh, there was never any excess. I mean, they had been over appropriated even prior to the budget, even prior to our FY24 budget where we appropriated FY22 revenues. They're saying in October, oh, now we know that that was all over. They over appropriated. I don't know. That was not made clear to us during the budget proceedings either. Do you have a firm number of, or able to confirm or deny whether we have over appropriated FY22 excess revenues?
I cannot until after we finalize the audit. And that the number that they gave you on September the 13th of 2023, that included deductions that they made over the last 12 months of 23, and I have no idea what those were, and so I can't speak to it. I can't confirm those numbers either. They're the only ones that can confirm those numbers.
All right. When there's a surplus after the audit is done, an audited excess, what happens to that money?
That just stays in the general fund.
All right.
Unless we either appropriate it to the rainy day fund or it's utilized other ways. But it's just like in your bank account, if you have excess funds, it's there.
Is that able to be used without appropriation?
No. Unless you have an appropriation, you cannot and should not be utilizing any money that hasn't been authorized and appropriated. But unfortunately, as I've said when I was here, there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of appropriation bills that are sitting in the books. And so at any time, they could decide, I want to build this road that was appropriated in 1993. And it's still good.
All right. Have you ever audited the Guam Memorial Hospital's finances? I think you just came out with one finding
Yes,
recently.
we did.
Yeah, could you tell us about that? What were the downside? I mean, what do you think the legislature should put its attention on from that audit?
The one thing I think everybody should realize is that the accounts receivable that they claim to have is artificially high. As they admitted at their last hearing here, as far as Medicare is concerned, they could bill, in the words of the administrator, they could bill $10,000 for today, but they will only get $1,550 from Medicare. So they have an outstanding $8,400 receivable every day that they bill Medicare. And Medicare accounts for almost, the 3Ms account for almost 63% of their revenue. They're never going to be able to receive all that because they admit that for the 3Ms, you get maybe 30 cents on the dollar. For the 10 or 15% that are actual payable, self-pay, they only collect about 15%, 26%, 26 cents on the dollar from them. And the same thing with the insurance. The insurance, they're all discounted. They'll never be able to collect all of that. So they keep, it's inflated, and it's artificial, and they keep thinking that they have all this money, but there's money that's never going to be realized. They increase their billing, and they've been authorized to do 5% a year, but it's never going to be realized. Maybe they're trying to say that, to justify to Medicare, that their TEFRA should go up at some point, but TEFRA will never be able to get up to 100%. So they'll never get to 10,000. Even if TEFRA was to be increased to 2,200 or 2,500, like the last time of $500 increase, it's never going to get to their full cost of service. You have a hospital that has to provide service for everybody that walks into that door, regardless of their ability to pay and whether or not they have insurance. And so they will always be short.
So do you think they should be aware of that? They should be banking that way? I mean, that hasn't changed over decades, right? So they know that they have to estimate less than what they're actually billing as concrete receivables.
But they are also depending on additional funds appropriated by this legislature to them and other funds. And that's how they're paying for certain things. But the thing is that they have to operate. And this legislature approved the nurses' increase. That increase is increasing their operations. And so they will always be short. There's no way that it's going to be a break-even or even a for-profit entity. This is not GWA or GPA.
Yeah, I don't think they plan to be profit, but no.
But they'll
I'm
never
just saying
break even
they
because
should know. They know what you know about the 3Ms and how much they're going to collect, right? Based on the rates.
They know it. They write it up in their MD&A. In my highlights, I don't put quotes around it, but 90% of my highlights is verbatim from their MD&A.
Right, okay. Are you aware of any impediments to the hospital using emergency procurement?
No. Like every agency, I mean, they can, if there is an emergency, they can justify it, and they have to just follow the procurement rules. As far as, I don't believe that there's been any legislation that prohibits a hospital from utilizing emergency procurement rules.
All right, thank you, thank you. My time's expired. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Shelton, do you have any questions for the OPA? None? Senator Lujan, do you have any questions for the OPA? None? Senator Tyree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, BG, thank you so much, or Mr. Public Auditor, thank you so much for being here the last few days. Greatly appreciate it, and I apologize myself for having you to wait this long. But I do have a question with regards to, because the audit is so late, I mean, really late. All my years, I've never seen it this late, coming out. And what issues can we foresee, like, the bond ratings or ratings to Guam, just knowing, people keeping an eye on Guam and our financial situation, what kind of detriment can happen to us for it being so late is my question. And the second one is, do you know when it's going to come out, the FY22 audit?
Unfortunately, I have taken to having status meetings with the team from the audit, much like I used to have status hearings with my juveniles. Because I can't trust them to just leave them for 3 months and figure that they're moving along. I'm scheduling it almost, there was one yesterday, there was one today, I have one on Tuesday. Because I'm on them constantly trying to get this out. And I keep trying to explain to them and to all the other agencies, GTOE, the hospital went last week, I keep telling them, if you would help me help you get your audit out before April, and the legislature has these audits when they're putting together the budget, they will be more sympathetic to you in providing you with the funds that you need, because you can see, they can see, and they have something concrete to show how you spent money in the previous year. Unfortunately, without the audit, you're in the blind. You have no idea whether or not they spent it well or they misspent it, and whether or not you should or should not give them money. And so I told them, please help me help you get it out on time so that you can get the assistance that you need, the proper appropriation that you need, and also that this body can make the right decision on how much to appropriate to you.
How about the other question I asked you? Well, you haven't answered the question. When do you think it'll be out?
Well, we issued, or the administration issued a letter that said it was going to come out August the 30th. It didn't. Then I thought we would get it out by the end of September. The meeting that I had the other day, until, and in compliance with generally accepted auditing standards, the audit can't be released until the administration submits their representation, their management letter, and their corrective action plan. And if they don't get it in, they can keep delaying it. And I keep screaming at them in the meetings of, well, just how much time do you need? Shouldn't there be a cutoff date? And I wish they would cut it off, but they keep trying to address some of the corrective action plans. And I'm going, accept it as a finding and just say you're going to address it, because you're obviously not, don't try to resolve the finding, just accept it.
So after 3 attempts
So, no,
to request.
I have insisted that we're going to get it out before the end of this month. I thought it was going to be this weekend, but after my meeting at 3 o'clock today, it obviously is not going to be.
Okay, and what kind of status are we going to paint ourselves by not having these audits out in time and this late? As a government, especially when we go out for budget, for bonds or, borrowing. Does it affect it?
I really don't know. I'm not a bond person, and so I don't want to speculate. But it's no secret that as far as I'm concerned, if we got a bad bond rating and couldn't borrow again, that would probably be a blessing.
Exactly. I think I'm really concerned. You mentioned earlier, okay, can you tell me, BJ, when are the audits due to DOA to turn in from these agencies? When are they supposed to turn them in? There's one thing to have the audit done by June 30th, but the agencies have to give it to DOA in time for them to, put it all together. When are these audits due from these agencies to DOA?
They should be due soon after this month. And
well, no, I'm
to
talking
his
about.
credit, Mr. Byrne,
In order
2
for
years
Mr.
ago,
Byrne,
we both decided that we were going to try to get these things out in time. He sent out a memo to all the agencies. Do your monthly and your quarterly closings.
So technically, in order for him to be able to.
Just trying to get them to do it.
So in order for him to be able to give us an audit or release the audit in June, the end of June, then the agencies must provide their reports to him by like 4 or 5 months out before the audit is due?
At least a month before.
At least a month before, okay. When did Guam Memorial...
And there was a time when the GovGuam audit was this late. I want to make sure that everybody understands that. That was, I believe, 4 years ago. And the reason why it didn't come out until September was because GURA hadn't released it, hadn't released their audit. And GURA is a material component unit of the government of Guam, and without its inclusion in the audit would have been qualified. So it was delayed that year, and I think many of you remember the commotion I created at that time with their executive director at the time about the fact that he got an increase in spite of the fact that this audit was late. And suggested at that point that increases not be provided to administrators if their audits are late. But
let's see.
I suggested that 4 years ago, and I think some of you remember it.
Yes, we remember it. I have another question. When did the Guam Memorial Hospital submit their audit to DOA?
When we released it last week.
Just last week?
Yeah.
So, but they were supposed to put that audit sooner, or when?
The way that we had planned it, and I had discussed this with Mr. Byrne a few years ago, after that incident with GURA, that I wanted all the component units to be completed by February 28th. Because then I wanted the GovGuam one to be March the 30th. And I kept telling all of them, Apple can get theirs out by December. And they are exponentially larger than we. But
Yeah, it's obvious, the frustration that you have, and not just for you, but this body when we're trying to put a budget together, and when it comes time to appropriating, I think the frustration is that we start appropriating unaudited funds because, we don't want to wait. We've been waiting too long when agencies need funding, when, especially now we're here today because of that situation for the hospital and trying to help it out, that we start ending up appropriating unaudited funds, and it just rolls that way. But definitely, public auditor, it's time for a bill that actually puts fines to agencies, department heads who receive quite a bit, six-figure, funds, or salaries, six-figure salaries, and can't even put an audit or provide an audit on time. So I think we need to get to a point where we start putting fines to these directors who don't provide their audits in time for us. And I think it's a bill that's coming its way pretty soon. So I hope my good chair, especially, being an vice chair of appropriations and seeing what the appropriation chair go through and his frustrations as well, I think it's time for a bill that will put a fine on these agencies that don't provide the audits in time. So I thank you again, and I again apologize, BJ, our public auditor, speaker, and for your time especially. But please take back that I also would like to give a donkalusijismasi to your staff. They have been so good at providing, information that we need if they can, and then taking our phone calls. So I greatly appreciate them and let them know that we do appreciate your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your assistance and support to our office also. But again, you have been very kind to us, but in the hearings that I've had before you, I have said it is imperative that this legislature make sure that the Department of Administration also gets assistance in upgrading the salaries of their accounting division, because they handled over $2.5 billion a year. And if they don't get the salary increase that they should have for their accounting division, they're not going to be able to hire people that's going to be able to do that kind of thing. And they will always be behind. They can't compete to get a CPA. The same thing with GDOE. Their audit is also not completed. But they just lost their CFO. I don't know what to do, but the thing is that they don't have the salary that is commensurate to be able to compete against the autonomous agencies, and now they can't even compete against my agency, and because I can poach from them because we now pay more. But you need to address all the accounting divisions, because we are no longer a mom and pop operation. We are now $1 billion or a $2 billion operation.
Thank you, BJ. And the DOE just lost their CFO. Is that Cooper Nurse?
No.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure.
He went back to auditing.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Senator Tidegui. Senator Canante, do you have any questions for the OPA?
I do have a question. First and foremost, thank you to the team. Thank you for being a great leader, Mr. Speaker. Do you feel that all revenues are available in this packet that was given to us?
Do you think what?
Do you feel that all revenues were addressed in this packet that was given to us? Were you the one that gave this to us? No.
No, I was provided with. The thing is that yes, that's what has to be done. Is you need to deappropriate some projects. I've been saying for years, deappropriate all the projects, and then when there's no outstanding appropriations, the only one who controls what happens anywhere is this body. But as long as this body does not want to deappropriate, and even when I was here, I have to admit that in 10 years, I tried to do that, but nobody wants to give up their project that was appropriated 20 years ago, because they have the hope at some point someone's going to decide that the new basketball court that's going to be built in, I don't know which village doesn't have a basketball court yet, they're going to expect that's going to finally happen. And they don't want to be the one that's known in the village as having given it up. And so until such time, you just have to accept that they're going to de-appropriate something in order to be able to appropriate something else.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Other than that, I've exhausted my questions.
Thank you. We have Senator Frank Bluffs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You got one question.
Just
sir.
one question. Mr. Speaker, referring to your FY22 financial highlights for GMH, the very last page of your report, you provide a schedule of full-time employee counts with the Guam Memorial Hospital. And it basically 1,146 employees.
That's on the last page of their audit.
Right. Do you have any opinion or any concern with regards to the number of employees based on the operations that they have? They're supposed to partake in comparison to, let's say, GRMC?
No, I think it would be inappropriate for me to publicly make a statement on that, because that would have to be management's decision. I do know that when I was committee chair, that GRMC always came in and said that they were able to operate with, I believe, about half the staff that we have.
And I preface that not so much, I don't want to put you in a position, but I think that to be very fair for GMHA, when we go back to questioning them, that may be an issue with regards to management on that. But thank you very much. I just needed to be able to point that out, that this was a topic of discussion in the highlights for FY22.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bluffs. Senator Burnett,
Thank you.
One question? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask the public auditor if he's able to state definitively if there will be an excess, any excess revenues for fiscal year 22.
On paper, I'm sure there is. And probably on October the 1st of 22 last year, that yes, there probably was excess. I'm not sure what it is today, but on October 1st of 1922, yes, there was.
Nice, smart answer. Are you aware of any other funding source that we can use to bring $30 million to the Guam Memorial Hospital?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I mean, because this legislature, even unfortunately, even during the 13 years that I was here, we passed too many appropriation bills, and they're still out there, and they're still, it's like having a wife or a spouse with a credit card. I still have that ability to be able to buy something else. And so you'll never know how much they're going to spend until you say, all right, you only have a limit, and you have to cut back.
And you can't say definitively when the audit will be out?
If I were at this point, after today's meeting, that I had at 3 o'clock, I want to have it out before next Friday, but I wanted it out this Friday. I wanted it out last Friday. But I'm pushing to try to get it out by next Friday. But unless Mr. Byrne is able to get the agencies to...
I don't know why no one has asked Mr. Byrne so for what, but Mr. Byrne... I know. Okay, I'm just, yeah. Okay, so I mean, we're just in this tough position because, you know, we're flying blind, trying to appropriate no audit, and then, you know, when we do, we get lectured from Adelup, and they're the ones holding up the audit. So it's frustrating all around. But I thank you for being here.
Okay, no, you'll still be blind because you're talking about the 22, not the 23. And so there's been 12 months since the 22. And so lots has happened in the interim, including a typhoon. And so I'm not sure what was left of 22 and what was left of whatever the CRER excesses were during that time. And so if they're willing to say they're going to set aside 30, I don't know. I wish someone had made that offer when I was chair.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, my colleagues. That being said, we'll excuse now the auditor, Speaker Cruz, and we'll recess until tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and we'll continue on with the rounds with the rest of the panel. Thank you. Recess till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.